You can see why they have so many orthopedic needs, because they bump into things, they fall off, and they end up in the hospital. So I go to this hospital. I'm not a doctor, but they're showing off for me. And so the next slide shows you this is one of 3 wheelchairs that they have in the hospital. It looks like a lawn chair with wheels, and that's what it is. And they get by with kind of whatever they can. The thing they have, we had this guy goes, one of his orthopedic surgeons does a knee replacement for a middle-aged man, and the guy stays in the hospital 30 days. And they don't have nursing care after 5 o'clock. The families come in at 5 o'clock, take care of the patients until 8 o'clock the next morning when the nurses come in. And, they're not rationing care. It's just a whole other world there. And then one last slide I had. This is the sterile shoe area. So they took me on a tour of the operating room, and you could see my shoes there, the tennis shoes. And then you put on these, look like Crocs that whoever was wearing the last put there. And now you're sterile and you're ready to go into the OR. So I did that, and the whole thing is very eye-opening. And when you come back and you start talking about whether you can have that MRI for your knee or this or that or the other thing, I just think we're all a little bit spoiled and need to kind of step back a minute. So that's my summer vacation. It was really fun. And the Kaiser doctors were great.
Tim.
A couple, one little fun story in Vietnam, so fun or not so fun. I've spent a lot of time in Vietnam. And one of the things, I took a couple of our docs over back in '07. We went over there and did a whole tour, trying to look at the health system in various ways and whatnot. And at one point, I was walking around with the chief operating officer. He's actually an MD of Nhi Dong Mo, which is Children's Hospital #1 in Saigon, or Ho Chi Minh City. And it was just him and me, and his English is very, very good. So we were talking about different things. And at one point, I finally asked him, I said, what's your budget? What do you spend a year, here and stuff like that? I knew it was going to be really, really, really low. But I said, compared to America, and I was thinking, but I said, how much do you spend? He goes, well, for the hospital, and this is a 1,000-bed children's hospital. Packard is 300 beds. This is a 1,000-bed children's hospital. There are no 1,000-bed children's hospitals in the United States. Running a census of about 1,300. About 1,300 kids were there that day. We were walking around. And he said, well, our budget for the hospital, capital equipment, doctors, nurses, because they pay their docs, it's all employed model, on and on and on. It says right about $3.5 million US dollars a year. And I'm like, wow. And he's like, yeah. And he says, well, how much do you spend? And I said, well, just short of $3 million every day. And we were walking, and he stopped, and he just bent over, then he roared back. He was just belly laughing. He just started laughing so hard, like, oh my God, I can't. He looked at me, I can't even fathom that. But anyway, we are spoiled. It's a very different world, and price is a big difference there, obviously, and things like this. But it's still radically different. The one thing I will say about, again, Kaiser experiences and things like this, or rationing in general, it's something that it's not necessarily even, I don't know if I want to say, I'm not going to make a judgment good or bad. It's just the way it is that a lot of those awards, because we're Leapfrog, a lot of those contests, you can win those. Our chief of pediatrics, the chair of pediatrics, actually, his name's Hugh Brodovich. He came from Sick Kids Children's Hospital. It's one of the most famous children's hospitals in the world. It's in Ontario, Canada. And so he was up there 10 years as the head of that. He's Canadian, and born and raised in Canada, trained in Canada. Came down, and we asked him at one of our mini meetings, we said, Hugh, again, GDP in Canada is X, you spend, on healthcare and all these kinds of things, and your statistics on health and all these things are excellent. How do you do that? And in the context of what you're talking about, he says, well, Tim, he said, people you don't die in a hospital in Canada.